If Nicki Minaj claims to have so much proof that Jay-Z owes her $200 million, why hasn't she sued him yet? Let's discuss. Now, y'all know from my previous videos, I have been talking about Nicki Minaj a lot. And one thing I had not addressed yet was her beef with Jay-Z. So in 2015, Jay-Z buys Tidal and he ends up relaunching it. Tidal's big thing was that it was this artist-owned streaming service and that artists would get paid more compared to Spotify or Apple. Now, a bunch of artists like Nicki Minaj, Madonna, Beyonce, Alicia Keys, Rihanna, Kanye West, they attended the Tidal launching event and they were listed as co-owners of this new Tidal streaming service. Reports state that they were each supposed to receive 3% of Tidal. Now, despite all of these artists being such a big part of the relaunch of Tidal, it really flopped bad. The problem with Tidal really was its marketing. Tidal tried to come into the music streaming space, which is already a really tight space to begin with. And it really focused on artists getting paid fairly and artists, getting paid higher rates for streaming, which is a reputable cause. We can acknowledge that. But Tidal didn't really solve any problems for consumers. So it is no surprise that by 2020, 5 years after its launch, Tidal only had 2.5 million subscribers compared to Spotify that had 138 million at the time. So in 2021, Jay-Z sells Tidal, and there's not an exact number that's been put out there, but there have been several reports that put it at just under $300 million. So in 2024, when it was announced that Kendrick Lamar would be performing at the Super Bowl for 2025, Nicki Minaj took to Twitter and she was ranting about how it should have been Lil Wayne. And we know that Jay-Z is pretty much the person who gets to decide who performs at the Super Bowl. He's also one of the co-producers of the halftime show. So she took this opportunity to air out all her grievances with Jay-Z. And one of those grievances was that he allegedly owes her between $100 and $200 million for Tidal. And look, I'm not saying that Nicki's lying about this or that there's no truth to her statement. I'm just super intrigued by the numbers in the math that she's done, because if it's true that she and other artists all started out with a 3% stake in the company and then he later sold it for $300 million, under what circumstances would he owe her $200 million, even $100 million? That would be 33% of the company. Steve Stout, a record executive, he very publicly suggested that the reason Nicki Minaj wasn't paid any money from Tidal was because she allegedly never signed the required Tidal paperwork. Nicki Minaj, of course, denies this, but if it is true, it just points back to my last video where I talked about how messy her businesses are and how she's just not a good businesswoman. So if it is true that Nicki Minaj is owed between $100 to $200 million from the sale of Tidal, why hasn't she sued Jay-Z? For one, I think that if the claims that she didn't sign paperwork are true, it means that she has no cause of action. She has no case. If this is the case, then I think that Nicki continues to bring this up on Twitter quite often because she wants to put public pressure on Jay-Z and Roc Nation so she can get her coin one way or the other. Another reason I believe that she may not sue Jay-Z is because of the clauses in the contract. A lot of times when you sign contracts in the music industry, it requires disputes to go through arbitration, which means you would have zero right to take the other party to court. You would just have to go through arbitration. Another reason I think Nicki might be a little bit more bark and no bite when it comes to this alleged lawsuit against Jay-Z is possibly due to discovery, which would mean that she would have to pretty much expose a lot of her financials. I think that she would have to bring in communications, deal documents, tax records. A lot of financials would be involved, and I don't think that she wants that out there publicly. We've already talked about how her businesses are all over the place and they're a little messy. I would not be surprised if some of her financials are a little bit all over the place too. And even more so if during discovery it is exposed that she knew that paperwork was allegedly not in place, it puts her at even more risk of legal action against her. I just find everything pretty interesting because other artists like Rihanna and Beyonce, they kept their stake in Tidal even after it sold. So why is Nicki Minaj yet again the only one being singled out and the only one that was not paid? It almost adds a little bit more credence to the whole idea of paperwork being missing. Now, I know that Nicki's fans love to talk about how Nicki is always one step ahead and how she, is playing the long game and is gathering all this evidence. I don't know if I believe that. I mean, ultimately, how long is the long game? Because in New York, there's only a 6-year statute of limitations for contracts. If the damages that Nicki incurred are related to the 2015 relaunch of Tidal, then she doesn't even have a case. She can't even take that to court. If it's related to the 2021 sale, she's never specified. If it's related to Jay-Z selling Tidal in 2021, then ultimately she has until 2027. But I would be surprised if it actually ends up happening. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Did any of that resonate with y'all? I just feel like it doesn't make sense in my head that if she is so confident that he owes her, $100-200 million, and it would, pretty much double her net worth, why hasn't she done it yet? I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments.
I think Nicki is going through a lot, hey? I may not be someone who likes her currently, but I kind of feel for her, in a way that, wow, it's really a pity that a legend like this goes out like this. And it's not even a thing of her being the only one. We've seen legends like her crash out bad beyond her state. Even I think she's not even crashing to financially to that point yet. She's still holding on financially to what she still has. I mean, 10 years, over 10 years is a long time. I think she did not strategically plan her exit. I think she felt that I'm gonna rule the game for as long as I can, and I don't think that's realistic. Even thinking that what happened to little Kim cannot really happen to you is such a weird take. But going back to this Jay-Z issue, I agree with her. If she has some kind of evidence against Jay-Z, why hasn't she come out yet? Why hasn't she said, I need my money? And I think maybe she's pushing the Barbs to do the work for her. She's using her fan base again to defend her. And she does have a fan base that will stand by her. And I think she would utilize them to whatever capacity. And there's only so much they could go in fighting this as well. So it's interesting. It's really interesting. I honestly feel bad for her that she's coming out this way. At one point, I kind of felt that Beyonce would take her under her wing, but Beyonce, being a businesswoman, brings strategic with her moves, moving her brand, does not want to associate her things with things that don't align with her brand, especially if she had worked this hard to make her brand Beyonce the way that it is. She doesn't even want to entertain her personal life like that. She probably has multiple lovers. She's done that, but it's none of your business. If it doesn't concern music, Jay-Z, the image that she's created thus far, then why destroy it? So she had the potential. It's kind of sad that it goes out this way.
Here's how I believe that Nicki Minaj has ruined her own legacy and why I don't think she'll ever come back from that. I think that over the last 10 years, Nicki Minaj has really blackballed herself in the industry. I also think, in my opinion, that Nicki has really shown herself to be a terrible businesswoman. So let's get into it. We know that Nicki Minaj is known to cut ties. The girl can hold a grudge. Now, for context, this is Nicki Minaj at the 2012 Grammys, her first and only Grammys performance. It is said, allegedly, that at the time of the performance, the Academy had actually asked her to change her performance because Nicki Minaj went in there wanting to perform an exorcism, and they thought that it was bad optics, and it was. Because Nicki chose to go through with the exorcism anyway, both Nicki and the Grammys were condemned by the Catholic Church. This was a big deal. It got a lot of headlines. I believe that this Grammys performance was the beginning of the end for Nicki. Now in 2019, she would go on to again call out the Grammys, specifically one of their producers, Ken, on Twitter, and she says that she was bullied into staying quiet for 7 years out of fear. And in 2022, she again calls out the Grammys, this time because they had moved the Super Freaky Girl song out of the rap category and instead placed it into pop. And she felt that if that was going to be the case for her song, that the Grammys should have also done that for Big Energy, Lotto's song. Now, do I think that Nicki was wrong in feeling the way that she was feeling about this song change? Not necessarily. Ultimately, the songs do have the same producer, so I understand her point of view. However, the Grammys sort of swapping songs around and moving them from category to category, this is very common after they review submissions. So I just think she went about it the wrong way. She went to Instagram and she said, and I quote, "If you can't tell by now that there is a concerted effort to give newer artists things that they don't really deserve over people who have been deserving for many years." And yes, if you're putting two and two together, this was the beginning of her beef with Lotto. Now, Nicki Minaj has not attended the Grammys since 2015, and despite being nominated like throughout the years, she's never won a Grammy. I wonder why. Now, really quick, let's talk about the 2019 BET Experience concert. If you remember, BET tweeted out in support of Cardi B winning a Grammy. However, I don't know who decided to write that tweet, but it was in very poor taste. While congratulating Cardi, they also said that Nicki was being dragged by her lace front. Now, like I said, the tweet was super distasteful, especially because this was really at the height of their beef. Like the Harper's Bazaar incident where Cardi B throws a shoe at her had happened not even 6 months earlier. Immediately after the tweet was put out, Nicki Minaj and all of Young Money pulled out from the BET Experience concert. Now, BET did, of course, apologize immediately after, but it was too late. Nicki had sworn off BET forever. Now, Nicki, of course, had every right to feel the way that she did about this concert. However, I think that her sort of writing them off forever, it's doing her a disservice. At the end of the day, these like award shows and these concerts, like the BET Experience, these are major promotional events for artists. For her to write them off forever is almost reducing her visibility as an artist. Like there's only so many award shows, right? So you can't go to the Grammys, you can't go to the BET Awards, like you have the VMAs and what else left? It's like she's willingly backing herself into a corner. And then of course we know that Nicki Minaj beefs with damn near everybody. This was a short list that I was able to like come up with like from the top of my head. Above culture appears Cardi B. But anyway, I bring this up just because due to like the recent events that have been going on with her, there's been a lot of chatter about what it's like to work with her. And from what I've seen, allegedly, she's not very easy to work with. Now let's jump into Nicki's businesses. Nicki has always continuously put out music, but the music industry does not pay very well. There is not a ton of money in it for the artists. This is why you often see so many artists sort of supplementing their income with like brand deals and collaborations. If you look at Meg Thee Stallion, she's done the Popeyes Hottie Sauce. She's done like a brand deal with Revlon. She's done Nike. She's done Coach. Cardi B just did the Bobby Formula like a couple days ago. She's done McDonald's with Offset. She's done Fashion Nova, Reebok. Like they're everywhere. Cardi B didn't put out an album for 7 years and yet she was still super mainstream. Yet Nicki Minaj, who has the longevity, she has this icon status, she's barely done any brand deals. Like, we can think back to 2012, she released these shades of lipstick with MAC. In 2017, she released like a capsule collection with H&M. These are so hideous. I'm sorry, but this is so below her. She did a Beats collab in 2013, but what has she done recently? Well, in 2024, I believe that Nicki gained some equity in the sustainable shoe brand and they put out a couple different styles. But again, like how does that match Nicki's brand? We already know Nicki is one of the most beautiful women ever. Why doesn't she have a makeup line? Why doesn't she have a wig line? Why doesn't Pink Friday Nails have a collab with Kiss or OPI? That's just off the top of my head. Nicki could be everywhere. Music just does not make as much as what people think it does. Imagine in a brand deal, an artist gets a 30% cut, which is already extremely generous because usually it's between 15 and 20. Imagine they get a $525,000 advance from the record label for an album. At a fourth of a cent per stream, not even half a cent, a fourth of a cent per stream, how many streams do you think it would take for an artist to pay back a $525,000 advance? 437 million streams. And that's just to pay back the advance. They haven't made any money on that yet. Now, of course, in my opinion, one of the most impactful ways that Nicki has really tarnished her image and ruined her legacy has been with her legal battles and her optics. Nicki loves to throw around the word lawsuit, but yet she's the one often getting sued or involved in legal battles. For example, a couple years back, Nicki Minaj was sued by a promoter because she did not show up to a performance that she was paid a deposit for. He was set to pay her over $1 million for this performance. So again, this goes back to me saying she's a terrible businesswoman because why are you not showing up to $1 million performance? She ended up having to pay him $1.4 million. In other videos, we also talked about the security guard that Kenneth Petty punched in the face. She never responded to the lawsuit in the first place, so she now owes him $500,000, and now he's asking the court to seize her home, sell it, and give him his $500K. A few years back, Nicki Minaj did not clear a Tracy Chapman sample. She ended up paying Tracy Chapman $450,000. And you know what? The sample thing isn't even a huge deal because most major artists have had issues before with like sampling other artists' songs or interpolations. That's not the problem. Well, the reason I bring it up is because it just adds to what I've mentioned before. Her businesses are messy. Nicki's been in the industry over 15 years. Why doesn't your team have that figured out? Why don't you have a process for that? Why didn't you get a song cleared? Surely your team knows what to do. Now, of course, we cannot talk about legal battles and optics without, of course, talking about Kenneth Petty, Nicki's husband, who not only spent time in jail for unaliving someone, but is also a registered SO. And let's not forget that allegedly Nicki Minaj also paid all of the legal fees for her brother, who is currently in jail for essaying his 12-year-old stepdaughter. Nicki also allegedly wrote a letter of support to the judge, calling her brother gentle and kind. And not that long ago, during her Twitter spat with Cardi B, she brought that case up again, saying that she still believes that he's innocent, basically, despite the fact that his fluids, and not from his mouth, were found in her underwear. All of these things are bad, terrible optics for Nicki. Imagine as a brand, you've got $3, $4, $5, $6 million to throw at someone to have them promote your product. Why would you want to do that with Nicki Minaj, who in turn would, by association, align you with the people that she keeps around her and align you with her views? Nicki is not brand safe, and given everything that's transpired over the last few years, I don't think that she will come back from that. I do personally believe that Nicki Minaj suffers from the same victim mentality that Taylor Swift does. And at first I was going to say maybe it's a Sagittarius thing, but I can't even say that because Britney Spears is a Sag and we love her, and we can't even apply the same logic to her. But in my opinion, I do think that her and Taylor share very similar mentalities. The biggest difference really is that Taylor Swift understands that she herself is a brand. Taylor Swift would never go on Twitter and just tweet out, "Thanks, Donald Trump." And it explains why, despite being in the industry for similar amounts of time, Taylor Swift has gone on to become a billionaire and Nicki Minaj is not even close. Anyway, that is my deep dive on how I think that Nicki Minaj has ruined her legacy. I'm going to make another video that's a follow-up to this one. It's going to be way shorter, and we're just going to talk about the whole Jay-Z thing. Because I went down a whole rabbit hole trying to understand why, if Nicki Minaj says that he owes her $200 million, that would double her net worth, why she hasn't sued him yet. And I think I have an answer. So if this video's up, you should expect to see that other video on my page as well.